Hello, I'm Leroy Garcia, and this is Blue Rain Gallery Podcast. Today we're in the main part of the gallery with three wonderful guests, Chris Pappan, Thomas Breeze Marcus, and Jesse Littlebird. Welcome, guys. It's a little bit different format in that this is more like a panel discussion we're going to get into. I was telling Chris, we were talking earlier about the integration of AI into all aspects of our life, including art and stuff. So me and my wife plugged in some names into AI and said, well, let's ask them to get us some questions. And so we're going to play a little bit of AI today. And I think they're pretty good questions overall. I'm going to ask a question, but I want all three of you to answer it. We'll start from the left to the right. So Chris will go first. You'll just have to remember what the question is. Deep thoughts. Okay. Here we go. Each of you works in a way that is rooted in tradition, but also unmistakably your own. Can you share a moment or influence from your early life that still shapes your work today?
Well, for me, people always ask how long I've been an artist. And for me, I've always been an artist. I've never stopped creating ever since I was little. So, and I think sometimes I try to incorporate things into my work from my childhood. There's actually a painting here right now that is a subtle nod to my upbringing with the little trailer park in that painting. So, just talking about my humble beginnings and it's a lot of Native people can relate to that too, I think, and that's why I wanted to include that in there. So, and I don't give AI permission to use my my voice or any of the words that I am saying right now.
Well, you're now in the public domain, so go ahead, Breeze.
Let's see. So, I think childhood is a good jumping off point for probably every artist. And kind of like Chris said, I feel like for me, it's very similar. When I get asked that question, how long have I been doing art? I just say since I can remember. But it's those fond memories from childhood that really stick out from, waking up early in the morning and smelling your grandmother's cooking and watching Saturday morning cartoons, to the artwork in the house being inspired by, in my personal household, different types of beadwork from my Ponca grandmother, basketry from our Autumn tribes, and a whole lot of other art that were gifts or bought from different areas. And funny enough, how is that incorporated? Well, I have this new body of work that's here. If people might not quite catch it, but it's Coyote and Roadrunners. And if you...
Desert life.
It's not only desert life, but it also goes back to those Saturday morning cartoons, the Coyote and the Roadrunner. So there's a little subtle hint of humor, but also childhood in that.
Yeah.
And even one of the paintings, it's the one with the Roadrunner Motel. It's called Saturday Mornings. So that childhood memory, that comfort, that being at peace and just being free to do whatever is important to hold on to into the work today.
Oh, nice. How about you, Jesse?
Well, like Chris and Breeze just said, like definitely childhood. I believe that to be human is to be a creative in general. So it's in us from the start. I actually also have a painting here that's heavily influenced my artistic career, which is I used to look at a painting by my dad, which is like one of his oldest paintings he ever made, which was this study of a Picasso painting, a bowl painting. And so I've been trying to emulate that painting for like my whole life and career. And so that's that one right over there with the bowls and stuff.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
So, yeah.
I saw a recent post of yours on Instagram based on that, right?
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. All right, here's the second question. How does your heritage inspire your creative process? And how do you choose which stories or traditions to carry forward through your art?
So for me, I didn't grow up in my tradition. I didn't grow up on my reservation. I actually grew up closer to the Navajo reservation than my own, which is fine because that was my community and that was my experience. But I always knew where I came from and who my grandparents were, and so for me, my artwork has been about learning a lot about my people, where we are, where we come from. So for me, I try to incorporate these traditional motifs in ways that are subtle and not overt, hopefully. But also, I try to be careful not to step on toes or, try to not do things I'm not supposed to be doing.
It's important in the native world. Huh?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I've learned lessons. I have gone too far in some ways, and learned my lessons, and but that's part of growth.
So you tell us again your tribal affiliation.
I'm a member of the Kaw Nation of Oklahoma,
Oh, nice.
and my grandmother is Cheyenne River Sioux.
Oh,
So
nice. Okay, Breeze.
So for the heritages, for heritage, I think like a lot of us, even Chris, and I'm not too familiar with his background, but I'm also multiple tribes, and that's a complicated thing for most Native folks, and not being beyond just multiple tribes, multiple ethnicities and backgrounds, and it becomes this sort of challenge to navigate sometimes, especially depending on how you grew up. Like myself, I grew up in a very semi-traditional household where, again, my Ponca side influenced by my grandmother, but also being away from that and in the environment of the Salt River, Gila River, and Tohono communities. And that is what I was immersed in, what I grew up around most, and that's what is reflected in my artwork now. And in moving forward, choosing what to handpick and interpret as far as stories go. So specifically stories, even the animals and some of these paintings here that are here now for market. Even in my mural work, I'm inspired by the stories that come from our desert people and our desert tribes. But I'm also inspired by how much we've been left out of that conversation in a big city like the city of Phoenix for the last century and a half, when things started changing.
Population movement.
Just everything. Reservations being set up, and us thankfully not being removed from our traditional homelands physically, but visually. We were removed once the development and sort of nature just took, well, not nature necessarily, but once things took its course. So now, if I'm painting a canvas, a record, a wall, it's all inspired by our identities and our stories to be hopefully reintroduced and regain that visual landscape of people's understanding, hopefully, that they can see and understand, like, oh, okay, Phoenix does sit on top of the O'odham communities and our ancestry, our ancient O'odham, known as the Ho'okam, but we don't call them that. And that's really important for me, and not just myself, but I see that in a lot of our community member artists. So it's almost a bit of a renaissance in a way, and that's important for me as well.
Yeah. How about you, Jesse?
So I feel like I'm a son of a family of a generation that survived assimilation, and I say survived in a way because assimilation is still an ongoing process as a part of colonization. My grandpa worked for the railroad, so he was one of the first members of our family to go out to the Bay Area, and that's because of that happening is what really made my uncles, my dad, my aunties, them go into more contemporary, what we would call contemporary art, and away from more like the traditional arts, And so me being like, I'm like one of my dad's youngest kids, so I am a part of this, like, technically I should be a part of like almost like an older generation than myself. So I've had to like grow up with this cultural sensitivity that even my dad and my uncles and my auntie, they were still trying to navigate, you know, in the contemporary field. And so put it onto like my shoulders, fast forward at 33 years old, it's like I like got put through like a microwave, you know. It's a lot quicker process in a way. And so I think the overlying theme with all Native artists is like, how do you really navigate the line of authenticity? And so like everyone's trying to be the realist Indian, you know? But I think there's more freedom in just coming from a place of sincerity and acknowledging the fact that everything's mixed up, everything is a result and a survival of assimilation and just living within the American culture as well. As much as we are Indians, we're also Americans too, and that experience reflects in our art, you know?
Yeah.
Definitely.
That's a wonderful answer. All you guys said, I love your answers. As far as where Breeze comes in his tribe, one of our artists, Billy Shank, is a avid collector of historic pottery, and the influence from Breeze's tribe actually rose all the way into southern Colorado, Mesa Verde. A lot of those images and designs I see in your work. So that's pretty cool. I don't know if you even realize that connection, but it's powerful and it's a millennial. That's important. Okay, here's a third question. When you feel creatively stuck, where do you go, physically or mentally, to reconnect with your inspiration?
For me, I'm always taking notes on things. So like if, you know, an idea pops into my head, or, you know, I'm hearing things, other people say something, I'm like, oh, that's a good title for something, you know, and then I'll write it down, and then, you know, I have a running list of ideas and musings. So yeah, so when I get stuck, I kind of go back to that, and then a lot of times I look at that list and I'm like, what did that mean? I don't even remember what that was anymore. But other times, you know, I go back and look and I'm like, oh wow, these things, you know, relate to each other, and and combining those things, and then, you know, can come up with a really good idea. So, you know, for me, that's how I get over those things. And then, you know, physically, you know, because you know, I'm a full-time artist, thankfully. You know, I'm just so blessed to be doing this, thanks to you, Leroy, and Blue Rain Gallery. Not that I'm sucking up or anything, you know. It's just
We love you, man. Okay.
You know, it's just, you know, it's you know, it's a blessing, and you know, I try to not forget that. And, you know, so, you know, and as far as getting over blocks physically, you know, it's just getting out of the studio and, you know, trying to connect with other artists. And, you know, my wife and I and my daughter, who are here today, we actually started a gallery in Chicago. And it's a nonprofit art space. And so, you know, it's a good place for artist community to come and gather. So, you know, the fact that we have that now, too, is also a blessing and just a great thing. So.
So you know how hard it is to run a gallery.
Oh yeah, I've worked for a gallery as well, so yeah, been all through it.
Yeah. How about you, Breeze?
So my studio is downtown Phoenix. You've been there, Leroy. And Phoenix being the 5th largest now city in the country, you know, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of chaos. If anybody, you know, like Chris, he's in Chicago. You know, there's a lot to that if you're not used to it. I thrive off of that because I'm used to it, even though Phoenix has grown. But when I do feel stuck, what I am fortunate is the Sonoran Desert right there, and that's my ancestral home. And it's an amazing thing to be able to go out there and find a beautiful trail to catch a desert sunrise. I mean, there's beautiful sunrises and sunsets here in New Mexico, but if you've ever seen one in the Sonoran Desert with the silhouettes of the saguaros, and you see those skies light up that are magentas and oranges and pinks and everything else, That's inspiring. Even if it's 120 degrees out, you find inspiration in it. You find humility in it. And even if things feel sort of stuck or hard at the moment, that's a good way of, for me personally, to reset. But the other one is, if I do feel stuck, I still try to force myself to go into the studio and work, because those are the moments when it's the hardest and you're most uninspired that I believe we should be in the studio, because that's going to be those moments that you face as an artist that you learn about yourself and how you can work through it. And I'm sure we've all done it. I've painted over canvases. I've, spilled paint and freaked out and had to go have a coffee somewhere and, come back a couple hours later. But it's important, I think. And once you can find out how hard it is and you learn to find it inner strength deep down and dig, it's empowering and it's good. So two different ways to do that, I guess, for me. Anyways.
Oh, nice. Jesse?
I mean, yeah, I would just echo what Breeze just said. I too, like, I'm a landscape painter, so I always come back to the land, and I think of my ancestors. Like, a lot of the art they created in traditional arts is all inspired by the landscape and by the earth and everything of that nature. I don't ever use the word stuck normally. I'm an avid, like, puzzle solver. I'm a big chess player, so, like, echoing some of what Bree said, it's like I look forward to those moments because it's something to work out, and you do learn a lot about yourself, and it's those beautiful moments that, like, you create something new sometimes out of that you didn't even think was possible. Out of those, the diamond, is created in the pressure of everything, and allowing, like, having galleries or spaces that allow you to take risks on stuff is also a big thing for artists. So I would like to kiss up to you also, Leroy. I like that you like, hey, bring something up that's like, I'm kind of taking a little risk on something, going back to a style or trying something new out, and that's really like what artists need, to have that freedom. And then also just like anytime I'm like getting frustrated in the studio, I like smack myself. I'm like, you are so fortunate and lucky to even be having this frustration, There's so many people that work 9-to-5 jobs and, like, they're frustrated about other kinds of things, but I'm frustrated about, like, a painting's not working out. Like, that's a blessing to me,
Well, those are all great answers. One thing I would tell the audience, all three of these gentlemen have nice Instagrams. I really enjoy Breeze's, though, because he's always showing his hikes in the morning, and it's never in the midday, right? It's too hot.
Right, but it's usually like 5 a.m. in the summer.
So you see his sunrises on his Instagram. It's a beautiful thing. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, here's another question. Your work blends tradition with innovation in powerful ways, all three of you. How do you decide when to honor traditional forms versus when to push the boundaries?
For me, I don't think any of those things are separate. I think what we call tradition is always evolving and is always pushing the boundaries. And there's always influences from outside coming in, and we're adapting our ways and our ways of thinking to these outside forces to meet our needs and to, and for us to cope as well. They can be coping mechanisms as well. So, yeah, I don't really see them as separate. And it's sometimes annoying when certain folks, for whatever reason, try to separate them, like, oh, your work isn't very traditional, or, but what is that really?
That drives me nuts too.
Yeah, and when somebody says that, they have a certain expectation that falls into stereotyping, and I don't, that's not right, because like we were saying before, we're all coming from these mixed backgrounds and have different experiences. So, it's, what is tradition really? And, our traditions have changed so much. that, you can't really say, this is the way it was done, because, in powwows now, competition for money and all these bright neon colors and stuff, that's not how it used to be. So, not that that's wrong either, that's just how it is. But it's a way for us to connect to community, and that's what's important.
I think what I've always appreciated about the contemporary Native artists, like things that are contemporary today become traditional tomorrow. So it's an evolution. Anyways, go ahead, Breeze.
Well, so as I was saying earlier, a lot of the murals and now canvas work that I do, if it involves some sort of figurative element, like a coyote, like a roadrunner, it's not just about cartoons, or a rattlesnake, etc. Those are, again, all inspired by what we call, quote unquote, traditional oral storytelling from the autumn. Now, what's interesting about that, and I had this conversation with a couple of other artists from my community and a tribal elder, as well as a tribal historic preservation officer, when we were doing this exhibit at the Heard Museum called The Substance of Stars. So because we were doing these interpretive pieces based on star stories, one of the things that is protocol and or tradition is those stories don't get told out of certain seasons. Now that's an interesting thing for us, because it's like, well, how do we honor that? Because it is something that could easily offend somebody when we're trying to be intentional with bringing forward those stories that, sure, they were told, they have their way of telling those stories once or twice a year in the coldest months, etc. But how do we get these younger generations, and this was the conversation, how do we get these younger generations from our community to understand those stories on a regular basis, when a lot of the times, because culture evolves, human culture evolves, a lot of them are stuck on their phones or their iPads and everything else. Maybe they're not attending a quote-unquote traditional storytelling event. But if we can sort of paint those stories and interpret it in our own way, and whether it's on inside the wall of an institution or a gallery or on the exterior of a wall somewhere in the city, it still plants the seed, and it's a continuum of that tradition, but it's not tradition anymore, because now it's being told in a new contemporary way, because as human beings, that's what we do. Just like the natural landscape and the environment, we continue to adapt, we continue to evolve. And I think it's, for us, with that specific story I just shared, it was a good end result to talk to those elders who had concern, but they understood what we were saying. We were saying we're not specifically speaking about these stories, but we're visually sharing them so they live on in another way.
I think the important distinction there is between tradition and protocol, and I like that. Yeah.
Kind of just piggybacking off that tradition versus protocol. I think protocol is put in place to things that are deemed, I don't know, sacred or honorable or traditional in a way. Protocol is put in place as in our communities as a learning opportunity, and I grew up, I keep talking about my dad, but like he's my biggest influence.
We're going to talk more about that in a little bit too.
Yes, but he was a traditional storyteller, and I think, and going back to when he was in his heyday, there were a lot of things that he wasn't allowed to tell stories, like what Breeze was saying. You don't tell certain coyote stories out of season. One of his jokes was, if you tell a coyote story out of the season, you'll end up with a furry bottom. A furry ass,
Nobody wants a furry butt.
Yeah. So and there's humor in that too, So like, it's not always, I think sometimes as outsiders and even ourselves, we can feel like outsiders in our own communities. And that is something that doesn't get brought up enough too, is because no one wants to get scolded. No one wants to feel like they don't belong. But it does start with yourself realizing that there is a protocol and there's a way to things, that as artists, you have to be sensitive to that. And as Indigenous artists, you almost have to be extra sensitive to it, because there's a whole community that is watching your every move, versus like if you're someone that doesn't come from a community like that, you have a little more freedom and you can be ignorant and ignorance is very freeing in a world of more and more rules, you know? Yeah.
For sure. Maybe we should talk about this now, because the next question is this. What's the biggest creative risk you've ever taken, and how did it shape your artistic voice?
One? Just one?
Right.
One of my favorite eras was Jesse Littlebird's dad. What was his name?
Larry Littlebird, yeah.
Larry Littlebird. Okay, and so you're talking about a generation there with Fritz Scholder and Earl Biss and T.C. Cannon and Helen Hardin and Tony Day. They were voices that took risks and decided to take a native voice to what they were doing versus what was being told them how to paint. So with that said,
That helped.
what
Thank you.
kind of
Yes.
risk?
It's like, I'm taking a risk being here right now.
Yes, you are.
Saying what I'm saying, you know, might be a big risk.
For me, one of the biggest risks I took was delving into ledger art, because I understood, the history behind it, but not really understanding the community that was out there. But I felt like I could possibly do this. So yeah, that was a huge risk, and that was, it changed my life, literally. And I'm glad I took that risk, because then I was brought into this community and welcomed, and I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, I was going to ask if you took any heat from your community on your jump into that, because ledger art prior to you is very traditional.
Right, and I wouldn't say I took heat. I'd just say not everyone quite understood what I was doing or what I was going for, but other people did. Other artists in that community understood, and it was just great, and and I think I helped inspire a lot of younger people to take those kinds of risks as well.
Yeah.
So
That's wonderful. How about you, Breeze?
Like Jesse said, how many? Just one? Yeah. Well, I think the most, sure, it was definitely a big risk, but the most influential risk for me, and I think a lot of people know this, but not everybody does. My biggest step in getting into what I do now, and what the style of work that I do now, is heavily influenced by my experience painting graffiti in the streets. So from the age of 13 till my late 20s, and when I say I painted graffiti, like, I was active. Like, I painted,
Not just tagging, you were doing all kinds of stuff.
well, and not just in Phoenix, Los Angeles, Chicago, New York, traveling broke just to go paint illegal graffiti everywhere. And after high school, I had a couple uncles. They really wanted me to come to school here in Santa Fe. And I thought about it, and I had a chance to do that. My tribe would have paid for it. They were all ready and set for me. And instead, I chose to not go to school and paint graffiti 6 nights a week, work a day job or a night job, really, and afterwards go paint every single night for years. And a lot of that, not just because it's the act of illegal graffiti, there's a lot of other consequences that comes with it, like you're risking your life. Like, I've been shot at. I've been shot at by gang members. I've been shot at by cops. I've been arrested. I've been beat up. Risked freedom. Thankfully, I've never done jail time. And this was all in my earlier days, but that all influenced my path to get to where I'm at now. And sometime around 30 years old, I figured, well, I need to figure this out. And was already developing the style that I'm been pushing now. And I think about that. I don't know what my work would look like if I had not painted graffiti for 15, 20 solid years and then transferred into murals and fine art. So I think that is the biggest risk, but I'm very grateful for it, because otherwise I probably wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation with these great artists, yourself, and the people watching.
Yeah. Thank you, Breeze. Go ahead, Jesse.
Driving up I-25, I guess, every day would be the biggest risk. I don't know. There's so many. I'll give 2, I guess. I think I would give a big shout out to Randy Barton, because it was actually in Indian Market 2017, I want to say, is when I went full in on art after being at Indian Market and seeing like, I mean, like I could fit in here. I could have a different voice. I could have a different kind of take on what everyone's doing. And then not really having a safety net or a network to fall back on. Pretty much my whole painting career up until like a few years ago, really. During COVID, I had like $300 to my name, and like I was living out in my car for a little bit, and like my car got broken into and all my stuff. And at that point in time, I was really trying to become a filmmaker and writing scripts and stuff. And then my laptop got stolen, so all my like work from the years that I've been working in the film industry was all gone. And so that's when I was like, you know what? It's not even really a risk to start painting. It's more of like, this is what I was always gonna be, probably, you know. And I'm like I'm kind of a natural gambler. I love Kenny Rogers, you know. So I love risks. Risks mean reward to me in a lot of ways. Not a reward every time, but every time you take a risk, you put enough chips down on the roulette table, you're going to win eventually, hopefully, you know? Yeah.
Well, I think it's wonderful, the journeys that you have gone through. And even down to me, I come from poverty a little bit myself. So it's hard, it's a struggle, but there's a risk to take a jump. And I'll finish this with a little bit about me. At 23 years old, I took my last student loan. From school, I was going to be a lawyer, and I built a staircase to my bedroom in my dad's house, and I opened up Blue Rain Gallery. And you know, it's the same. It's a risk and a struggle, and the struggle is real, but it's what makes us great. I really appreciate all three of you, and I'm very proud of you. I'm very honored to represent you here. And we've had a good journey. We're going to have a continued good journey. I'd like to thank our audience today for tuning in to Blue Rain Gallery podcast. You can follow us anytime on any of the platforms. You can go to our website, blueraingallery.com, and go to podcast on the menu bar. I'd like to also encourage everybody, these three gentlemen have an online store through bluerainprintshop.com, and you can find their products as well as go to the website and find their artwork at any time. Thank you for coming today.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's fun.